My name is Michael McRae. I'm the Director of Graduate Student Admissions here at WPI, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our first of a series of professional development workshops. Today we're starting off with adjusting to life in the U.S. How many of you are brand new to the U.S. or to any foreign country? You've never been outside of your home country before? Oh wow, so you've all been here or been to another foreign nation before coming to WPI. Maybe there's a misunderstanding of the question. You can't hear. What else is new? Is that better? So I was asking how many of you have been to a foreign country or had been to a foreign country before coming to the US to WPI? Okay, so most of you, for the first time, this is your time outside of your home country. Actually, today, for me, is an anniversary. It was 29 years ago today that I started my year of study overseas in Germany. So I think we've all been there. We've all experienced life outside of our home countries. And for me, it was a great experience, and I hope that will be the case for you here at WPI. So I'm going to introduce to you today Colleen Calhan-Pandey and Tom Thompson. Yeah, last time we checked. So Colleen and Tom are here from the International House, and it's located at 28 Trowbridge Road. Many, if not all of you, visited the house upon arrival to check in with your immigration documents. Tom is the director and has been at WPI for nearly 30 years. And Colleen is the associate director, and she's starting her 7th year at the International House. Her office offers help with immigration-related questions, cultural programming questions, and matters related to cultural adjustment living in the U.S. Today, their discussion will focus on the latter, and we'll start with a brief video about cultural adjustment and continue with a discussion on ways to help you cope with the changes that come with living in a new place.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Yeah, just to reiterate what Mike just said, Colleen is going to give you a brief introduction to the video, and then afterwards it's really going to be more of a dialogue. We want to engage you, we want to hear your experiences and see what you can relate to in the video, and hopefully that will help you. And at the end we're going to show some slides that have some of the framework for these issues, so you can put it in context. So, but first Colleen is going to introduce the video.
All right, welcome everyone. So just to kind of reiterate what we've said, we want this to be interactive after we show the video, so please don't be shy. I know you're still relatively new to campus, but we want to hear your voices later on. So if you are shy, we might have to start picking on you. We don't want to do that. But we will. And as you've probably noticed here at WPI, we're all pretty friendly, approachable people. So there's no need to be shy or scared of us, I promise. So I just wanted to briefly introduce the video. The video it's something that we've used for many years in our undergraduate international orientation. It's a personal favorite of mine. I really like it. It was done. It's not a professional video. It was actually done by a graduate student several years ago, I think maybe around 2008. So it's getting a little bit dated now because there is a reference to George Bush being president, and he hasn't been for quite some time. But I think it really captures well some of the issues people face when they first come to the U.S. So like I said, it was done by a graduate student who was an international student himself. He was originally from Israel, and he was studying at Columbia Business School in New York. So there's going to be a few references to New York City. So when he makes those references to New York City, just imagine Worcester, you know. So when he talks about Central Park, imagine Elm Park. And when he talks about the Brooklyn Bridge, imagine flying into Boston. Okay? And then also just on a side note, because it isn't a professional video, some of the camera angles you'll see, it's kind of funny. They like zoom in and out and in and out, and we know it's a little bit funny, but it's a nice video. There's 2 parts. It's about 13 minutes long, and then after that we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that he brings up in the video. He talks about some of the things that he found a little bit challenging when he first arrived. and he talks about the whole concept behind culture shock as well. And then, so while you're watching the video, think of things when you first arrived in the U.S. that maybe you found challenging, words that you heard that you didn't understand, things that you've noticed that might be a little bit odd or frustrating to you. Keep that in mind, because that's what we want to hear about once the video's over. All right? So are you all ready? Okay. Come on, more enthusiasm. Are you all ready? Yeah. All right, thank you.
It's 115 students from around the globe sitting here in this room. 60% of you are international. There are 33 nations represented in this room. And those kind of mix of cultures create this very exhilarating, fascinating environment, but also very, very, very challenging for all of you. And I'm going to discuss about the personal, social, and academic aspects of being an international student here, starting with the personal. So I came from Israel 2.5 years ago to start this dual degree in journalism and business. And back home, I was a journalist, a senior editor in the second largest newspaper. And when I came here sitting in your seats, just like in a different building, I remember that I was like in this state of mind that is called shock. Now, I was in a total and complete shock. I was sitting right here, and I knew my name, I knew where I live, I knew what I have to do today and tomorrow, but everything was like kind of foggy. I was like walking in a cloud. I couldn't see it. It didn't feel like my life. Now, in retrospect, I realized that this is called culture shock. And while culture shock is experienced differently by different kinds of people, some things are still common, like sadness and loneliness and frustration and anxiety, and I had trouble concentrating at the beginning. And if that's not enough, I was also feeling left out and misunderstood, and eventually I started to really hate Americans. For a good couple of months, I really hated Americans. And during that month, I was like, I couldn't deal with American students. I couldn't deal with domestic students. I was seeking the company of Israeli students because they were the ones I could relate to. They were the ones I could understand. And eventually, I developed like this extreme homesickness. I really, really wanted to go back home to mommy. It felt like this entire experience was a mistake. Now, I wasn't alone. 38% of the international students who are now in their second year say that they encounter symptoms of culture shock. Now, we asked this question after a year of school. So, in my opinion, this figure is at least double because people tend to undermine their difficulties as time goes by, especially people with big egos like us, right? So I'm sure there are like some international students sitting here in the crowd and that didn't attend international orientation saying, culture shock? Me? No way. I just arrived on Sunday, and I'm completely in love with everything. And that might be true, maybe because those people are in phase 1 of culture shock, which is called the honeymoon. I came to the US, and during the first weeks, I was in love with everything that I've seen. Everything. I mean, seriously, take a look at that. The view from the Empire State. Pretty nice, huh? Impressive. Or Central Park. Love is in the air. You know? Or my favorite place, the Brooklyn Bridge. Kind of a nice bridge, huh?
The Worcester equivalent.
So that was the honeymoon. I came to the US, I worked for years on my application. There was nothing more that I wanted than to come here and sit here at Columbia Business School. And when I was like, it was when I was seeing like all the skyscrapers and walking like in Central Park and everything, and the city is beautiful. I felt that like I've made it. I'm in the center of the world. It was a great feeling. But every good thing must come to an end. And when the honeymoon is over, starts phase 2, which is the what am I doing here phase. And during that phase, me and Miss America kind of had a big fight. And when I was walking down the streets, I wasn't in love anymore. I was actually feeling like this guy. This Israeli Borat. Everything became so hard. The hardest part for me was that I couldn't speak. I didn't have the vocabulary. And back in Israel, when I was a journalist, I was making a living out of words. And coming here, I lost my biggest skill, the ability to express myself the way I wanted. And when you cannot express yourself the way you want, you cannot sound smart, you cannot sound intelligent, you cannot sound funny, you cannot sound anything. But that was kind of the big thing. There were lots of little things that were kind of annoying. For example, the subway. You know, what is uptown? What is downtown? How do you read a subway map? So many times I found myself in the wrong station, sometimes in the wrong borough, more than once. Dumb things like grocery shopping. You know, I couldn't find the food that I like. And when I finally did, it tasted really, really bad. Measurement. I mean, who invented the inches, right? And how heavy is 1 pound? And 30 degrees Fahrenheit, is it really hot or really cold, right? Coins. I mean, what is the dime? What is the nickel? What is the penny? And how come that the dime is smaller than the nickel? And how come they don't have numbers on them, right? It's the only country in the world that has no numbers on the coins. But what bothered me above everything, beyond comparison, was the Americans. The Americans, not the president. I found the Americans to be so positive all the time. Always happy, even if they had no reason to be. You know? I felt this kind of plastic, that I could not communicate with them because I was not getting like the real answer from them. So, for example, if you go to the second-year students here at Columbia, and you would ask them, how was your summer internship? Seriously, do it. Everybody would tell you, I had an amazing summer internship, even if they really hated it. And so many times, people said to me, hey, Dan, let's have lunch sometime. And I would never hear again. Ever. Which eventually led me to the conclusion that all Americans are fake. And when I saw that all Americans are fake, there was like kind of this halo effect. I was also sure that they are distant and insincere and hypocritical and superficial because they are fake. And if they're superficial and distant and insincere, they're probably artificial and overly programmed and flexible and naive and loud, you know? Bad taste in clothing, which is true. Now, you are laughing now, but for me, that period of time was very, very bad. I really, really wanted to go home. This entire experience looked like a mistake. You know, one of the strongest memories that I have from that period of time is that I lie in my bed just before going to sleep. And suddenly I feel the bed kind of shaking. And then kind of floats in the air and leaves my room through the open window and then flies east, crossing the ocean, crossing the Mediterranean, and lands in my old apartment in Tel Aviv. Now, that was a sweet dream. Now, around that time, you can see those little groups forming here at Columbia. The Mexicans with the Mexicans, the French with the French, the Dutch with the Dutch. And it doesn't really make culture shock disappear faster.
The Chinese with the Chinese, the Indians with the Indians. But we're going to go to part 2, which is a little bit more positive.
But luckily, there's also phase 3, which is the last and final phase, and we call it, where is happy hour? So you can basically see me here wearing a dress and a wig and a mustache, fully immersed in the American culture. Now, what eventually made me adjust was understanding what we call the American phrase book. And I'll give you an example. For example, when an American used to ask me, how are you? How are you doing? I used to give like these long answers of what I was doing today and my plans for tomorrow because they were asking how was I doing. It took me time to understand that this is not a question. This is just hello. Now, question for you. When an American says, let's have lunch sometime, what's the meaning of that?
What do you think? Let's have lunch sometime. What was that? What do you think? See you next time. All right.
What's the meaning of that? What? Yeah, it's like I'm just being polite, you know? Don't take your calendar out. You're not going to have lunch with that person. When an American says, I'll have to think about it. What?
What does that mean? It's not going to happen? All right, let's see.
What's the meaning of that? Yeah, I thought about it. The answer is no. Right? When a professor tells you, you might want to consider doing X, what does the professor mean?
You better do it? All right.
I absolutely expect you to do X. When the same professor tells you you would want to do X.
What do you think? All right, let's see.
What's the difference? Where's the domestic student? It means do X now. When a professor returns a paper and says, that's an interesting paper, is it a good thing?
Never? No?
It's a bad thing, right? I have nothing good to say about it. I thought it's a compliment at the beginning. I was getting like this interesting paper. Say, yes, Mom, I got an interesting paper. When a friend tells you, sounds great, you know, 3 exclamation mark, lots of passion and enthusiasm, what's the meaning of that?
Thoughts? It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
There you go.
It's fine. You know, everything, you should downgrade everything in the US, but at least like two levels. So if someone tells you it's not bad, what's the meaning of that? It is bad, right. And that's a great idea, but that's all but a great idea. So once I was able to understand the way Americans talk, the way that they behave, the way of this culture to exist, are they really fake and insincere and hypocritical and everything? Eventually I realized that everything is just cultural. It was the way that my culture, which is very direct, perceived the American culture, which is less direct. Now, in your culture, the word fake can be different, because we all come from different countries and different words. But just remember, it is just the way you will perceive the American culture. We asked the international students how long until culture shock is over, and 26% said it was less than 1 month, 24% between 1 and 2 months, the majority, 27% between 3 and 4 months, and then we have 11% and 12%, 5 to 6, and more than 6 months. If you take a closer look at this slide, you can see that culture shock would last, on average, 1 semester, from now till April. So to sum up the culture shock part, say that the y-axis is your mood and the x-axis is time. International students are now here. You know, yesterday you went to the lighthouse, you were like eating well, then you play bowling and going drinking. We feed you, everything is nice, you like your peer advisors, right? But very soon, usually it happens when school is going to start, when the workload is going to be a bit more intense. Bam. And then going to be phase 2, but luckily afterwards, you're going to get adjusted back to phase 3, and that will take again, on average, by the end of the semester. A few tips of getting adjusted. The most important tip is to be patient. You're all here for a reason. You're all smart. You're all talented. You all faced difficult situations in your life before, I'm sure. The one thing you may not have is patience. And that's key here in getting adjusted, getting through culture shock. The second one is remember your personal goals. You all came here for a reason. You wanted this MBA. You know what it's going to give you back, you know, in the future. So just remember your goals. Remember why you came here. That really helped me. See the adventure in it. When I kind of like on my bay days, I kind of like imagine that I'm like this Robinson Crusoe touring through this island and understanding the natives, you know? It really helped me. Use your sense of humor. That's also key here. Deal with stress as it arises. Don't let stress accumulate. That's true for every period of time in life. You have the gym right here, and it works wonders. And lastly, ask for help if you need it. The peer advisors are here. The Student Academic Affairs is here. Chazen Institute is here. OSL, Office of Student Life. Everyone is here to help you. So just don't hesitate to ask for help.
All right. So that's one of my favorite YouTube videos for the beginning of the year. I hope that you all enjoyed it as well. But we wanted to take a few minutes, well, first of all, to kind of add to his list of things to help you be prepared. I wanted to add the bullet point that it's important to remember that you're not alone, that you, as you saw, the percentages of people that reported dealing with cultural adjustment or culture shock, they're quite high. So don't feel like if you're starting to miss home, if you're having some of the symptoms, and we'll talk a little bit about the symptoms of culture shock later on, that you're by yourself in this. As Michael had mentioned, a lot of us as well have been away from home, studied abroad, lived in another country for a long period of time, and so we've been there as well, and we know that this can happen. So you definitely have friends at the International House that you can come and talk to, but don't feel like you're the only one feeling this way, because most people do feel this way, and it's normal, and it's okay, and it's not something that you need to keep to yourself necessarily, or be ashamed about, or to be too concerned about, but know that there are people on campus that you can come and talk to, and we'll talk a little bit more about who those people are, but that was one thing I definitely want you to make sure that you know as well. So.
If I can just add, so on a personal note, whenever I see this video, I always think back 30 years ago when I immigrated to this country, and I can so relate to how are you. First time I was asked, how are you, I started telling them that I had a headache. And they looked at me like, you know, what is this guy doing? I just said hello, and he's telling me that he has a headache. It was like, it really took me a while to realize that this, as you called it, the American Facebook, those are just greetings. I mean, I had made the mistake too of, you know, we should do lunch, and I said, I don't have time this week, but next week will be good. And again, I get this stare, I don't want to go to lunch with you, what are you talking about, you know? So I have been through that, and every time I see this this video, it sort of brings me back 30 years. So as Colleen said, you know, we are here for you, and we understand some of these issues because we have gone through them ourselves. I also want to add one dimension that he didn't talk about in culture shock, which is the classroom. You come from education systems that probably have a different expectation of how you behave in a classroom. American classrooms in general are a lot of activities. Professors expect students to participate, to ask questions. It's okay to have a critical question. It's okay to, you know, disagree with the professor. And some of you might come from cultures where that's a no-no. I always love to tell this story. This was the other way around. An American student who was studying in India, and he was in a political science class, and the Indian professor was saying that Albany was the capital, no, New York City was the capital of the New York State. And this American, you know, very eager said, oh, that's a very common mistake, professor. It's a very common mistake. But actually, Albany is the capital of New York City. The professor looked at him and said, how long have you been here? 6 months. Oh, that's why you don't know. They changed it after you left. He couldn't lose face. That's the Indian culture. You can't lose face to a student. If that had been reversed, that would have been perfectly all right. So think about that in the classroom. You really should try your best to get out of your comfort level and participate in discussions. Give your point of view. Don't be shy about engaging in conversations with your peers and with the professor.
Yeah. So with that said, we wanted to kind of open it up a little bit to some discussion of some things that maybe you've noticed. Many of you arrived in about mid-August, and we're moving into mid-September, so you've been here for a few weeks. How many of you feel like you're in phase 1 still? The honeymoon phase. People are still like, yes, I'm in America, woo! A lot of you are not in phase 1 anymore. Okay, so are you guys in phase 2 then? The ones that haven't raised their hands? All right, a few of you, all right. So my question to you is, he listed out some of the things that were confusing or a little frustrating to him. The coins, not knowing, you know, quarter, nickels, dimes, temperature, Fahrenheit and Celsius, and is it hot, is it cold, I don't know. The measurements, trying to find food that he liked. What are some of the things that you guys have noticed since you've been here? I know that there are things that have frustrated you. Even the honeymooners, I'm sure that there are things that have frustrated you. So let's hear. This is the audience participation part of the program. Don't be shy. The food. What about the food? What you're going to get. So she doesn't know the name of food. So like if she orders something, she's not quite sure what she might get. So you don't necessarily know the name of everything that is coming, or you might be surprised when you order something. So like if you try to search it, you might not find it if you're looking for the translation. If the word for the food is in a different language, because we do have food from all over the world here, you might not find the one that you're looking for in your dictionary. True, I can see that happening. What about others? I know food is a popular topic that people struggle with, so don't be shy. I know you out there are having some trouble. I see a smile over here. What? Yes, you in the blue shirt and the gray shirt. Both of you are smiling. Oh, okay, well, remember back to when you've been here before, when you first arrived. What were some things that... It's very greasy. Food is very greasy. All right. So even if you go and find food, like Indian food in the U.S., it's not going to be like what you would have. Which you said Mexican and Italian? Mexican and Italian is the best food. There you go, recommendation right there. Other food issues. Has anyone tried to seek out like an ethnic grocery store here in Worcester to try and find food from home? Yep, Patel Brothers. So there are places that you can go. What about some other people? What other food issues? Are you mostly cooking at home, or are you eating on campus, or what are you doing? So it was good at first, but now you're kind of tired of it? Yeah, so you cook at home. And which is nice, that you can live off campus, live in your own apartments, cook at home. That can help with your adjustment because you're kind of moving into, it's a gradual, change, because you can cook flavors that you maybe are more used to at home. But food is always a big one that people have trouble with. What about, how many of you have never experienced winter before? A few of you. A few. Have never seen snow. All right, so what do you guys think about what it's going to be like in a few months at winter time? Very cold. Are you ready for it? Are you a little nervous? You ready for it? All right. How many people still need to go shopping for winter clothes? A few people. All right. Do you have any worries? Are you concerned at all? Like, is it going to be really cold? Can I handle it? Or are you like, yeah, I'm ready to do it? I have to admit, so she said she's from Brazil, that during the undergraduate international orientation, we have a group of exchange students from Brazil, and it was a little bit cooler. It's been warm this week, but during the undergraduate international orientation, the Brazilian students were wearing winter sweaters already. And I was like, oh, my friends, you're going to be very cold in a few months. Yeah, dressing. Dressing is another thing. Have you felt maybe that you might dress differently here than you would back home, or what do you think about clothing? I think people are feeling very shy. Don't be shy.
Can I just add?
Yeah.
I just want to add a few words about the winter and the snow, because even within the U.S. there's a big difference.
Yeah.
So if there's a snowstorm in Washington, D.C., and they get this much snow, the city closes.
Yes.
Okay? If there's a snowstorm in Worcester, and we get this much snow, we go to work. So it's also, it's not all over U.S. Depending on, in the Northeast, we're used to snow, and I have been at WPI for 28 years, and I can count, I think, on two hands the number of times WPI has closed because of snow. So when you wake up one morning and you can barely open your door because of snow, don't think, okay, WPI is closed, I'm going to go back to bed, because it's not going to be closed.
Yeah, and I come from a town that's like the place of ice and snow, so if you really want to hear some scary snow stories, I can tell you some scary snow stories. But yeah, another thing about weather, since we were on that topic, how many of you come from places that are closer to the equator than we are right here in Worcester? I think a pretty decent chunk of you, yeah. So up here, the days, because we're farther from the equator, in the summer it's nice, we have longer days, we have more sunlight, but in the winter we have a shorter period of sunlight. And it can get dark in the winter as early as like 4:30 in the afternoon, and it might not get bright until like 8:30 in the morning. So that can be a difficult time because the weather's cold and crummy. You might have snow on the ground, but then there's not a lot of sunlight either. And I think for some people that come from places where you're used to having a lot more sunlight, that can be a difficult adjustment too. Even students in the US that come from places that even the weather is sunnier during the winter, like it can be very cloudy a lot in the winter here, and they come here from like Florida where it's really sunny all the time, they can even have trouble adjusting. So it doesn't necessarily, adjustment doesn't have to be just because you're coming from a different country. It can be difficult and different because you're coming from a place that just has different weather, different types of things that you're just not used to. So again, if you feel that that is challenging, come and talk to us. And there are other resources on campus, like, did you know that down at the Student Development and Counseling Center, which is located on West Street, they have a lamp that helps with what's called SAD, seasonal affective disorder. So people who have trouble in the winter when it's really dark and it's cloudy and they're not seeing the sun enough, sometimes they're having trouble because they're not getting enough vitamin D and they're not getting enough sunlight. So there's this lamp that you can sit down under at the Student Development and Counseling Center that gives you some of that light that you might be missing if you're if the weather's just been really dark and cloudy. So there are some resources around campus that you might not even have thought of before. Yeah.
How many of you are looking forward to, if you were back home, would be looking forward to the next holiday that would happen in your country, whatever celebration? How many of you would be looking forward to Diwali, I assume? So, okay. So, that's something that I had some issues with when I first came here, that I had to sort of get used to, that now I have to celebrate American holidays, and nobody here even know that it is the Danish National Day or some holiday from back home. For many of you, if you're from groups of, where we have a good number of students, luckily many of the student organizations and so on do have programs and celebrate your holidays. I think it's very important for you, for the cultural aspect, to both try to participate in American holidays to the extent like Thanksgiving is coming up in November, to the extent you can get invited to a faculty member's house or experience that. That's a very typical American holiday. But at the same time, don't give up on your own holidays. You need to stay in touch with your own culture and find ways to celebrate those holidays, and try and share it with some of the Americans who have no idea what they are. So Chinese New Year, Diwali, whatever it might be, you should celebrate it even though you're in America.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And speaking as one of the few Americans in the room right now, it's really fun to get invited to people's houses and learn more about those other cultures. And that also helps with the adjustment as well, being able to share. Because even though sometimes you can feel frustrated with Americans because maybe it doesn't seem like they're really listening to you or interested, sometimes they are, and maybe they're just not telling you in a way that you would think that they might be. Of course, you'll find people that maybe aren't so interested, but there are people that are interested, so seek those people out too. You may find them in your classes or in different organizations on campus.
So, Colleen used the term frustrated with Americans. which is probably a little nicer than when he said hate Americans. But how many of you, and be honest here, how many of you have for a moment, doesn't have to be a whole day, but just for a moment, have had that feeling, that I'm really frustrated with those Americans or with those foreigners, because Americans to us are foreigners.
I'll close my eyes. Don't worry.
So, only a couple? I don't seem to have an honest audience here.
Don't be shy. Come on. We're happy to hear.
Oh, okay. Any other things you want to bring up, Kristen, or you want to go to the slides?
Maybe just as a last thing, because he did bring it up as part of the American Phrase Book. Language is a big thing, and one of the things that I like about his presentation was the fact that he talked about what it's like to be very verbal in your home country. He was a journalist, he was an editor for a newspaper, and then to come here and feel like one of his greatest skills, being able to speak, was taken away from him, because even though he spoke English, he couldn't articulate himself in the same ways that he would have been able to articulate himself at home. How many of you have felt this at some point, that you've just not been able to articulate yourself in the ways that you'd like to? All right, yeah, definitely. When I was an undergrad, one of the places I studied was in France, and I speak some French. My French wasn't that good when I was back there, and that was really humbling. It was really, really hard not to be, and I feel I'm a very verbal person, and so not being able to speak and say what I wanted to say was probably one of the hardest things that I had to go through when I was in France, and it took a lot to try and get over that. So I definitely understand. But in kind of learning more about American English, and some of you may have learned English from a different system, British English, or maybe you speak English widely in your home country as well, like maybe Indian English might be a little different than American English, and then people here use a lot of slang, they use a lot of cultural references that maybe you might not be aware of, talk about TV programs and other things that are popularly known. So since you've come here, like I said, you've been here for a few weeks now, have you guys heard things that you didn't quite get or didn't quite understand, or you were maybe confused about? Has anything sounded funny to you? Any words or phrases that you've heard? A lot of American jokes. Humor is really hard cross-culturally to understand. Yes, definitely. Humor is a big one. What about some other language-based things? Has anyone heard people use the word wicked? Like, oh, I'm wicked tired today. That class is wicked hard. Like, what wicked? What is that? What does that mean? Has anyone heard someone say that? Or is this the first time? You heard it? What do you think it means? Yeah. So that's one of those words, if you looked it up in the dictionary, it wouldn't say that it means really or very. It would say somebody who's mean or evil, right? But here in New England, we use that as a slang to mean very or really. So sometimes you'll hear that, even in advertisements, because it's a very cultural thing here in New England. They don't say it. If you go to California and you go, oh, I'm wicked tired right now, they'll be like, what? What are you talking about? So that's one example. But I know you guys have heard other things. Can you at least give me 2 or 3 more examples before we move on? What was that?
I'm done.
Oh, I'm done. Oh, darn. Darn. Darn is kind of like a very soft swear, yeah, that's a good way to say it. So like you could say a stronger swear, but that's like swear light. but yeah, if somebody like, oh darn it, someone's like, oh, something was bad. Yeah. A fly on the wall? Why is she talking about flies and bugs? Weird. Yes. So do you know what it means now? What does it mean now? Great. So she said, fly on the wall. Have other people heard people say this before? Like, oh, just pretend I'm like a fly on the wall. And it's a way of saying, like, you know, keep me updated, let me know. It's a way of like, I want to know what's going on without actually being there, I guess. So that's a good one.
Just share kind of funny story with when I was at a different university many years ago in the U.S. when I first came. My administrative assistant had this habit of, when somebody came on to see me, she would say to them, "He's tied up right now," and they would look at her, you know, what is going on in this place here? Why is he tied up? And that's just an expression saying he's busy. But you know, that's something I love for and had no idea what it's talking about. The other thing is, I mean, some of you must have heard some of these sports idioms that I still don't know. I mean, like out of the park and, you know, all of these things. Touch base, yeah.
Touch base sometime.
So, what did you? Oh, okay, yeah. So that's something that the Americans love to use to sports idioms.
Let's hear a few, because you're going to hear those a lot. So touch base is one that even I use. Like, there's sometimes when I'm talking to a student and then I catch myself going, oh, maybe they won't know what that is. So have you guys heard? Have you heard any expressions that might sound like sports expressions? Touch base is a big one. It was out in left field. Have you heard that? Oh, that was out in left field. So that's a baseball metaphor. There are a lot of baseball metaphors in the U.S. because baseball is a big American sport. And that left field is like, you know, when you're kind of not in the right place. It's not right with the answer or whatever like that. There's so many of them, and whenever I'm put on the spot to think of one, I can't think of any, but there are a lot. And think of some of these things as teachable moments. So if you don't understand something, I want you to walk away from this presentation knowing that it's not a bad thing to ask someone to explain, and that's okay. And certainly if you feel shy and you don't want to ask like friends that you're with, I mean, you can always ask us too, but don't be afraid to ask, because you won't learn these things over time unless you do find out what they are, and then you might even find yourself 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, after your time in the U.S., talking to someone and then saying, let's touch base sometime, and not even realize that you're starting to use some of these phrases. So language is another big one. So we want to kind of transition from our little discussion of some of the things that you might find difficulty adjusting with to just talking a little bit more about cultural adjustment, or he called it culture shock, which is a term that people use. I kind of like the term cultural adjustment a little bit more, because I think it's more of an adjustment. Yeah, it can be a shock, especially in that second phase, but it's more of a process of adjustment. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Do you want? Okay. So he talked about this in the presentation, but you can sometimes see cultural adjustment as like a U or as a W. So he talked about honeymoon phase 1, so we're all pretty comfortable with what that means. And then the shock part of it, like the adjustment where you're like, oh, I'm really frustrated. So that's kind of the bottom part of the U. And then there's the initial adjustment. So that's usually, you know, about a semester. But then sometimes you can even go through multiple cycles of cultural adjustment or culture shock. And so you might find yourself feeling pretty comfortable and adjusted at the end of the semester. Then everyone goes home in December, January, and the campus is really quiet, and it's dark, and the weather's crummy, and you're missing home, or maybe there's a holiday at home that you're missing, and then you find yourself kind of back where you started, and you're feeling like you're stuck in phase 2 all over again. And that can be another type of adjustment. They call it mental isolation here, but it's the same idea. And then eventually, over time, you do reach that point of acceptance and integration into the culture. So don't feel like it's going to last forever. The hardest time is probably that first semester when you're going through that period of adjustment. So, yeah.
This was just a visual. So these next couple of slides are basically just sort of summarizing what he covered in his video. But I want to just...
Well, one last thing before before we get to the resources, that I wanted to mention that he didn't talk about was reverse culture shock. So some of you may be in the U.S. for 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, a long time, and then you might go home, and you might find that after being in the U.S. for so long and adjusting to the culture in the U.S., that you have trouble adjusting to your home culture. And that can be sometimes even harder than the initial adjustment to the United States, because you're used to your home culture, you're used to feeling comfortable there, and then all of a sudden, especially those who might not have the opportunity to go home that frequently, find that it's even harder to adjust to culture back home. And so that's called reverse culture shock. It's something that exists, and it can be something that's difficult. So we've also wanted to make sure that you're aware of that it does exist. And if you ever needed to talk about that, we would also be happy to do that.
So, since it's close to 1 o'clock, let's just talk a little about the resources. We mentioned several times, I mean, the staff in the International House, Colleen, myself, and Kate, who works for us too. And Kate is an American. She has traveled to many different places as a student. All three of us are more than capable and willing to sit down with you and talk to you if you have any of these issues and feel any of these issues. The Student Development and Counseling Center is another great resource, and I wanted to make sure that you understand that at WPI, to go to the counseling center doesn't mean that you have to have a mental issue, and you can go there and talk to them just if you're feeling sad, lonely, homesick, any of those things. You don't have to feel that you can only go there if you're on the verge of a nervous breakdown. That's way too late in the process to go and talk to anybody. Sometimes we talk about food, and sometimes actually this culture shock manifests itself in a physical way. You might have stomach aches, you might feel that you constantly have a headache, you might be very tired. So sometimes the nurses in the health center can be a useful resource for you to talk to. What happened here?
I just put it up when you were talking.
Okay. And then, of course, in your respective departments, make sure that you seek out a couple of people in your department that you feel comfortable talking to. And it doesn't have to be the professor. Sometimes the admin in the department might be the best resource for you. They are very good listeners. It might be somebody who works in one of the labs. It might be another student who's been here for several years. But just seek out people and talk to them. You should never feel that you have to keep this to yourself. Okay? There should always be somebody you can talk to. I can't say enough about the importance of don't keep it to yourself. You really need to seek out people, not because you have a problem per se, but because it is important for you to talk to and find out that you're not alone feeling this way. So I mean, 38%, and as you said, they probably didn't answer the survey honestly, so probably more like 60% have had these feelings at some point. And the reason that it's important to deal with this is, for you to be successful here, you have to overcome these things. You cannot go on feeling that Americans are fake and you can't talk to them or anything. You need to get through this phase to be a successful student at WPI.
Yeah, and he did say at the end of that first part of the video that one of the ways people sometimes deal with that homesickness is just sticking with the French with the French and the Indians with the Indians and the Dutch with the Dutch and all of that. But I mean, if you decide to live in the U.S. more long-term. I mean, we do have a melting pot of people here, but you will probably be working with people from all sorts of backgrounds, and you have to learn. It's better now to learn how to work with people from a variety of backgrounds, so that you're better prepared when you go out to look for jobs in the future. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. And as he said as well, some of the ways to help cope with some of these issues of feeling frustrated or cultural adjustment issues. Like we said, you can always come and talk to us, but making sure that you deal with stress as stress arises. Don't let it all build up. Making sure that you take care of yourself, that you're getting good amounts of sleep, that you're eating healthy. If you're noticing that some of those things are changing, let us know. Seek someone out. some of the other things, if you're kind of feeling irritable, feeling like you need to be home, calling home all the time, it's great with technology that we can keep so connected. But sometimes if you are on the phone or on Skype or talking with home every day for hours every day, that can make the adjustment period a lot harder as well. So just kind of keep taking things in moderation can also help you. So. All right.
Yeah. Any final questions or comments? Because it's 1 o'clock and the session is scheduled. Yeah. Yes.
Is there any resources for those to learn more about the American phrasings?
The American
Re-
phrases?
Resources to learn more about American phrases. You can come to the International House and we have books with idioms. That would be one place that... And Billy McGowan, who's our director of English as a second language, can probably give you some suggestions too. But we do have idiom books. Okay. Yes.
Bus schedules?
The bus.
The bus routes?
How you can check the bus route? You can go on what is it called?
WRTA.
WRTA's website.
So WRTA, like Worcester Regional Transport Authority, WRTA.com, and they have all the schedules and everything right there, and you can check.
A word of caution about public transportation in Worcester. It doesn't always follow the schedule.
Any other questions?
Okay, but thank you very much for being a
Yeah.
participatory audience.
And you should know where we all are, 28 Trowbridge Road, but if you need anything, come find us. Thank you.